The lighthouse's curse. Elias had seen the lighthouse as just a job. As a 26-year-old city kid, he saw this remote island battered by the Pacific's wild waves as nothing more than a relic of an old romanticism. The lighthouse's immense, antique light cast its beam defiantly into the foggy waters, like a confident, unshakable giant. His job was simple: keep the light on, clean the glass, and maintain the log. He had ignored the old sea tales the townspeople told about the lighthouse's curse. He believed in science and logic, nothing else. But everything changed when a strange layer of fog settled around the island. It was a white, suffocating blanket that didn't lift for weeks. Harbors were closed, ships rerouted. This fog was unlike any he knew. It was damp and cold, but also held a strange weight, almost like a breath. And that night, as Elias stood at the top of the lighthouse, listening to the creaking of the light, he heard the whispers for the first time. The whispers weren't words. They were a sad, distant melody. It was as if someone, from somewhere deep, was crying in a whisper. Elias assumed the sound was just the wind or the old pipes of the lighthouse. He checked, but found nothing. Yet the whispers grew clearer each night, as the fog thickened. They were no longer just a sad melody but a chorus carrying a desperate, endless guilt. Elias began to feel that the old walls of this lighthouse were hiding not just a light, but a secret. The whispers had crept into Elias's sleep. At night, he would dream he was on a lost ship in the middle of the sea, listening to whispers coming from the fog on the deck. He would wake up drenched in sweat. The fog outside never lessened. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and the fog became the island's only reality. One morning, during his routine check, he noticed a crack in the lighthouse's huge glass lens. Surprised, he investigated where the crack came from. There was no mark on the outer surface, but inside, an almost invisible symbol was etched into the glass. It wasn't a crack. It was an old, strange symbol trying to break the glass from within. The symbol was two intertwined circles, one trying to envelop the other. Elias had never seen this symbol before, but he felt it was a protection spell. At that moment, he realized the whispers weren't just illusions in his mind. The lighthouse was cursed, and the curse was held in place by this protective symbol. The whispers were the voices of something trying to break free from the curse. Elias was not alone in the lighthouse. A soul was trapped within these walls. His job was no longer just to keep the light on, but to unravel this secret. Elias decided to research the lighthouse's history. He went down to the library on the bottom floor. The shelves were filled with old, salt-stained books. After a few hours of searching, he found an unmarked, leather-bound journal in a dusty corner. The last pages of the journal contained shaky, handwritten notes from a former lighthouse keeper, a man named Robert. Robert's journal described everything Elias was experiencing: the fog, the whispers, and that strange symbol. But there was one difference. Robert knew what the whispers were. According to the journal, a previous lighthouse keeper, in the 19th century, had made a deal with a pirate ship and deliberately dimmed the lighthouse's light. Because of this treacherous act, a merchant ship had been wrecked on the island's rocks. The souls of the innocent sailors on that ship had clung to the lighthouse's light, turning into a cursed chorus of whispers. Robert had written that the keeper before him had taken his own life out of guilt, but his soul was trapped in the lighthouse. And Robert himself had lived in that cursed lighthouse for months, etching the symbol into the glass to free those souls. Robert had made the light a prison to stop the curse. But the last lines in the journal were full of despair. There is no silence, only whispers. They are breaking the glass. This curse, it will last forever. Elias looked back at the lighthouse glass after reading the journal. The crack was not a sign of a curse, but of a debt that needed to be paid. The sins of the previous keepers were now his legacy. The curse was no longer on the lighthouse. It was on this glass, which was trapping the innocent souls in the fog and forcing them to relive their tragedy over and over again. The whispers weren't screaming for revenge. They were just asking for help. They were the lost souls in the fog. That night, a storm began at the lighthouse. The fog had grown even thicker, and the lighthouse's light was flickering erratically because of the crack in the glass. The whispers were no longer whispers. They had turned into screams. Outside the glass, shadowy, human-like figures began to appear in the fog. The sound of the storm, the roar of the ocean, and the screams combined to make the crack in the glass bigger. Elias felt the symbol on the glass might break. If it did, all the souls would be set free, and everyone on the island would be forced to live with the weight of these whispers. Elias grabbed a screwdriver and approached the light. If they were alive and had feelings, he could reach them somehow. The only way to free them wasn't to break the glass. Maybe it was to guide them, not to trap them inside the lighthouse. Elias decided to turn off the lighthouse's light. Darkness surrounded him all at once, and the screams intensified. The shadows grew more distinct around the glass. But Elias wasn't afraid. At that moment, he had stopped being a keeper of light and had become a keeper of conscience. Unlike an AI, he had to do something on behalf of humanity. He opened the lighthouse's glass window. The storm's wind licked his face. He held a lantern and spoke towards the whispers. "I heard you. I listened. You are here. And you are not alone." The shadows coming towards him stopped. Elias continued to speak. "You were lost. But now, the lighthouse's light won't just show danger. It will show you the way home." Elias slowly lowered the lantern light towards the outside of the lighthouse. He listened to every whisper, every scream, and understood what they wanted most. Not imprisonment, but peace. With his lantern, Elias lit a light of mercy. He moved the light as if it were a beacon, guiding them to a safe harbor instead of the rocks. The shadowy figures followed the lighthouse's light, moving deeper into the fog. Elias felt each one of them find their peace and leave. The last shadow, the spirit of the old lighthouse keeper, stopped in front of him and bowed slightly. Elias nodded back. Then he too disappeared. Silence returned to the lighthouse. The fog was lifting, and the ocean was calm. Elias turned the lighthouse's light back on. This time, the light was not just a warning. It was a beacon of mercy and hope. Our story ends here. But perhaps this was just a beginning. Because from that day on, Elias was not just a keeper who protected the light, but a lighthouse keeper who listened to the whispers of the past and guided lost souls. And you, dear viewer, when you hear the whisper of a lost soul, do you have the courage to show them the way?